Five Nights at Freddy's has been popular for a while now, and with almost every game adding a new interpretation to the lore, there are so many great theories that have aged poorly, and many bad theories that aged even worse. So today, I found some old FNAF theories that aged bad, and if you're a new FNAF fan, you might never have even heard of these theories. I hope you enjoy the video. Mikevictim. I'm gonna talk about this theory not as someone else's post, but just as a general thing. I'm sure there are a few different versions of Mikevictim just because that's how a lot of these core theories from the past have developed. Essentially what it's saying is that Michael Afton is the crying child or the bite victim from the end of night minigames in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. And as you can imagine, if you know the lore around FNAF 4, this brings up a few interesting problems. Specifically, it ignores the brother character who has the Foxy mask, and as a result, it kind of makes that character just a nothing burger. And because of that, it implies also that Mike lived the bite. So that scene of the bite of 83, where Markiplier is like, oh, is that the bite of 87? Actually, the bite of 83, whatever, nerd shit. It's implying that that kid lived that. And like, no. Interestingly, a lot of the evidence came from the books and the logbook, but even then, there are so many problems. I'm scrolling through them right now under a FNAF Theory wiki, and it's just so convoluted. It doesn't seem to be debunked, at least on this wiki, but I'm not going to take that as being credible. And what it's essentially saying too is that we play as Michael Afton and basically all of 1 through 4, except for maybe FNAF 2, because that would be Jeremy Fitzgerald still. So what this is basically saying is that we play as Michael Afton through games 1 through 4 in sister location. And I think that could be interesting, but there was just not enough evidence to piece that together to make that work. It would be so much simpler if we did play as just one character throughout the majority of these early FNAF games, just to really get to know the characters, because the lack of characterization in Five Nights at Freddy's, I feel like is a huge missed opportunity. Now, this next one is super debunked, but I really, really like this one. And if you're an OG FNAF fan, you're gonna know what this theory is about, which is Puppetvictim. And it's saying that the crying child ends up possessing the puppet. And there is so much evidence visually that makes this make sense. And I kind of wish that this was the case. In canon, the puppet's possessed by Charlotte or Charlie Emily. So obviously this theory didn't age well and it's debunked. But even just visually, the puppet and the crying child, they very much look like they should have like been the same character. I'm gonna just point out the obvious elements, the tears. I mean, the crying child's name has been debated about forever. There's so many people talking about different like names, and I don't even want to get that. I don't even want to get into that. But the tears are like the biggest focal point of the character, so much so that the character is referred to as the crying child, and the puppet has these tears going down too. Not only that, but the shirt, I think, also has a strange like coincidence too. The shirt that the crying child wears has these like 2 like gray stripes, and on the puppet's arms you can see these stripes that are kind of similar to the crying child's design in a way. I'm gonna keep talking about the imagery for a second here. In FNAF 3's minigames, there's like this black and white version of the puppet kneeling down and crying, which is a similar pose to the one that the crying child does in FNAF 4. It's moments like these that are like really similar that almost make me wonder if it's a coincidence. But with how much FNAF has retconned itself and made corrections, I wonder if this was the intention at some point. But beyond the imagery and like when you start really getting into the story and everything else, it doesn't make sense for it. And I think the biggest point of evidence, and I'm just going to point it out too, is the complicated process of Remnant and how like the possession works of the children's soul going back into the animatronic. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not too knowledgeable on all of that kind of lore, but essentially because the crying child's the bite victim and Fredbear absolutely crushed that child's skull, it would make more sense that the crying child ends up possessing Golden Freddy. And narratively, it also just makes more sense too. Besides that, I think other characters have more connections to the puppet, even like Puppet Mother, and let's just talk about that theory now too. In FNAF 2, there's this mini game, Take Cake to the Children, and the mother of the child that got killed outside that window is the one who ends up possessing the puppet through some form of revenge. And then there ends up being like a puppet jump scare too at the end of the minigame, which kind of ties it all together. But really what got the puppet mother theory to be so popular was the FNAF 2 song by The Living Tombstone, It's Been So Long, which is such a great song. I love it so much. I hope it plays at the end of the next FNAF movie. Personally, while these theories didn't age well and don't make sense for a lot of story reasons, especially having to do with Charlotte Emily and Henry Emily later on and their inclusion in the story, I still really like these series, and these series are very popular. I think if you talk to any OG FNAF fan, they'll probably know these theories, and I really hope they do the character justice in the movies. Okay guys, so I actually found a post made 9 years ago about someone making a theory about how the bite victim or the crying child possesses the puppet, and I just want to read through it, go through the evidence and stuff. And while, you know, it's aged bad and everything, part of this video, why I want to make these videos is just to kind of, I don't know, it's nostalgic going through the old evidence and old lore. So let's read it. I know this subject has been touched countless times before, but I believe I have finally gotten a satisfying answer to this mystery. Through this post, I'll go through all the supporting evidence and all the supposed contradicting evidence so that you can get the whole picture. Now, who is the bite victim possessing anyway? Golden Freddy? Shadow Freddy? I don't think so. Even if the majority may not agree with me right off the bat, I believe that the bite victim is possessing none other than the puppet. This has been discussed numerous times, but due to contradictory evidence, it has been pushed aside. However, I believe I have a satisfying counter-answer to each of the contradictions. To start off, however, I'll go through the supporting evidence just to give a refresher on what this theory has going for it already. To start off, I'll showcase the easiest connection to make, the physical similarities between the puppet and the bite victim. As you can see, the tears, streaks, and black and white stripes are rather striking, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. Secondly, in FNAF 3, the hidden mangled minigame reveals the next strand of supporting evidence. If you follow the good ending route in this game, you should be greeted by a kneeling puppet. This may normally be seen as an inconsequential piece of evidence, but as many have pointed out, it shares a striking similarity with a familiar bite victim pose. Now that we have taken a look at the supporting physical evidence, it's time to address the contradicting evidence. Okay, so I'm gonna stop it right here. So this is kind of what we talked about before, the, you know, the imagery and stuff. I'm curious to see how they tackle the contradicting evidence. This was made 9 years ago, so I'm not sure how many FNAF games have been out by this point of the post. We found out in like another video through the comments that these Reddit posts that are covering like old FNAF theories, they're kind of rounded up and how long ago they were posted, so I'm not sure when this exact post was made. To start off, as many have pointed out, how can bite victim possess a puppet if he's obviously possessed by the kid outside the pizzeria in the FNAF 2 minigames? Simple, this kid didn't possess a puppet, instead he possessed Golden Freddy. Oh, that's interesting. Are you saying they like swapped? But like, why? The puppet jump scare doesn't mean he possessed a puppet shown, he just has some kind of connection as the one who brought him back to life. Okay, this makes sense once you remember how the kid in the Golden Freddy suit stands out in the Give Life minigame. He is in group with the others, he only flashes in at the very end, matching how he was killed outside the establishment. This also works with the Foxy Go 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 minigame, as the fifth child represented is noticeably different, standing up in a death just as the kid standing outside the establishment. Oh, this is really interesting. I'm kind of bought in, but half of it is nostalgia. I wonder if I really, like, if I could ask any question to Scott Cawthon, I feel like it would have to do with the puppet and the crying child. While it's been debated if that's been like the retcons he's like made or whatever, it just, there's so many pieces that like fit together that they just can't be a coincidence unless it's just like purely stylistic and it like, because it was just in his mind, he made these designs and it really was just a coincidence. But there are so many pieces of evidence that makes me think it's not. But what about the missing children incident newspapers? They say all the children were killed inside, right? And to that I say, correct. I believe the newspapers on the left actually describe the killings happened inside the FNAF 2 pizzeria, the closest pizzeria in the timeline to the FNAF 1 location. The newspapers on the right describe why the FNAF 1 location will close its doors, leading to the FNAF 3 night minigames and Fazbear's Fright. The children are all present in the FNAF 2 Save Them minigame for the same reason all the original 5 are in the Go 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 minigame. And the FNAF 2 minigames aren't 100% perfect matches with the real world events they are based on. But then why do the newspapers say the deaths happened in the summer if FNAF 2 takes place in November? Simple, the gameplay takes place in November, while the recorded messages by phone guy take place in summer. Quote, welcome to your new summer job, end quote. Meaning the deaths, the Springlock suit tampering, and the haunting of the toys in the last birthday took place in the summer of 1987. You play after the location is shut down, explaining why everything seems so locked in place and moldy despite being in the place of parties. You still get paid because you're watching over the building before the toys can be scrapped and the withers can be taken somewhere else, being retrofitted into the classics. Now on to the next contradiction. If the bite victim is a puppet, then how are the rumors already being spread that the animatronics came to life and the pizzeria stashes bodies inside of them? I believe that these rumors and bite victims' phobia of animatronics come from the same event that created Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie. Simply put, the spring-lock failures described in the FNAF 3 tapes haunted the original spring suits, which is why they're only on stage, and the employees are wearing the different replacement suits. I believe bite victim witnessed this event and became traumatized. The other children, having seen employees put on the spring-locked suits in the dark room, misunderstood this as hiding bodies in the animatronic. Bite victim would later use this knowledge to bring other children into the animatronics as the puppet. Okay, while this theory hasn't aged well or anything, I like this last line that kind of implies, oh, bite victim saw it and whatever, the crying child saw this and was able to use this knowledge as kind of reasoning to why the puppet did what they did in the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame. And I think that's pretty cool. I think having a reason there and having that intention there, if it was true, would have been so cool. There's a lot of moments of FNAF that seem unintentional or reach. And this is one that I think feels a little satisfying just because there's a setup and a payoff that makes sense. At least to me. Obviously, let me know what you think in the comments down below. But wouldn't this also mean the events shown in FNAF 4 happened in 1983 over 1987? Yes, it would. I'm sure you all heard the supporting evidence for 1983 before, from Fredbear and Friends to FNAF sister location private room cameras, so I won't dive too deep into that. One big piece of evidence that we don't see the bite of 87 is that Fredbear's mouth crushed bite victim's entire head. You may say it's a non-detailed sprite, but Fredbear's mouth is simply not the right shape to cause a concentrated injury. I believe it was instead one of the FNAF 2 animatronics during the last birthday party of the establishment, possibly Mangle as she has a bite to fit the bills. Also, Phone Guy explains that it's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know? The bite victim obviously dies from the flatline at the end of the Night 6 minigame. But what about the toy animatronics owned by the girl in the park? These are simply based off the characters themselves, not the actual animatronics. They would later become the base of the toy animatronics in the future, which explains why Toy Chica can take off her beak. Now to deal with the other information that might make the series seem unlikely, namely the minigame sequence at the end of FNAF 4's Night 6. Who's talking? I believe the slightly off-color text is actually William talking to his son directly. William wants to put him back together. The first few lines are Michael apologizing for the incident. The other lines are by victim's imaginary friend through the Fredbear plush. I believe that William made the puppet animatronic in his son's likeness to put him back together, and succeeded. Unfortunately, the puppet learned of his father's misdoings and plotted against him. Thus, in conclusion, the bite victim is possessing none other than the puppet, one of the most elusive characters in the series. This was a bit of a longer post, but I'm really glad I read this. This is such a cool theory that probably wouldn't even be talked about anymore. I mean, this post is 9 years ago. That's so cool. While it didn't age well, and I'm sure there's more evidence that debunks this, I don't know. I think it's a really cool part of the FNAF lore. While we're talking about the bite victim and that character, I found this very controversial FNAF theory made 6 years ago, titled "The Most Controversial FNAF Theory: The Bite Victim Became Absolutely Nothing." And I just want to read this post out. Everyone's here speculating who Bite Victim is. Am I the only one who thinks Bite Victim just died and that's it? If he was killed by Golden Freddy, why would the animatronics in UCN Ultimate Custom Night refer to Golden Freddy as the one you should not have killed if William didn't kill the bite victim? And no, the protagonist of UCN is not Michael. Knight Marion states, "I am a fearful reflection of what you created, and Michael didn't create the puppet." Shadow Freddy has been an irrelevant character for 4 years. He can't be Michael since, yeah, bite victim definitely died in the ending of FNAF 4, and Michael definitely survived FNAF 4 and went on to become the protagonist of Sister Location and presumably Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Simulator. He can't be the puppet since that's Charlie. He can't be Fred Plush, for that wouldn't make sense for why the soul would inhabit a plushie. Like Mr. Hippo said, sometimes a story is just a story. If you try to read into it and look into every little detail, you'll drive yourself crazy. Actually, I do like that end bit. I think that Mr. Hippo is such an underrated character. I love him. I think his inclusion in Five Nights at Freddy's is really funny. And I don't know if that's Scott being like, hey guys, you need to chill. Like, it's not that deep. But then why would you make these games and all these puzzles and stuff if there wasn't like, you know, hidden things in there? Clearly there's some intention with some of these puzzles. I mean, have you looked at the logbook? Anyways, this is a pretty interesting theory, but I don't like it. No hate to the person who made it, or, you know, if you believe it or whatever, but it just doesn't make sense to have such a big event like the Bite of 83 and then not do anything with it afterwards. It's not like the story utilizes the grief too much of the characters afterwards. A lot of what we characterize Michael as and what we can infer motivates him is from this event, but it's not too explicit in the games, especially when it comes to like the dialogue and stuff between Michael and William. I don't know. I feel like it would have been so much more powerful if Michael kind of mentions his brother, or that he still thinks about his brother, because that's not as really utilized. And I think that's the only way this could work. If, yeah, you know, sometimes tragedy just does happen and the bite victim, you know, could have just died and moved on. But because they did nothing with that through the other characters, it would have just been pointless if they didn't do anything with it. I don't know. It's a more common interpretation that the bite victim ended up possessing Golden Freddy, and whether or not you want to get into the whole like how many souls are in Golden Freddy and all that. But that is, I think, what the game was more so going for, especially with the whole it's me stuff and the how creepy and like weird Golden Freddy is in those early games. Obviously he's possessed, and I think it's implied that the bite victim had something to do with that. It'd be really weird to have all this built up for this character, especially in FNAF 4. Even if you don't assume you're playing as the bite victim in FNAF 4, the mini games are basically showing the story of the character, and it's all this build up, all this set up for what this theory assumes is nothing. And I don't know, that just does a disservice to the story. If you like hearing about old game lore and bad FNAF theories, you should check out this other video. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and as always, I hope you're a bit less bored.